Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to another edition of thoughts online. And tonight, what we're trying to really look at is how do you really approach COVID-19 as different countries are really looking at getting back to normalcy. Now, there is a particular Facebook Live version that I did 1 or 2 weeks onto the lockdown, but I think it's a great thing to really take a step back and probably revisit some of those discussions in terms of how one could really approach this returning to normalcy, so to speak. Now, one of the things we need to keep in mind is, as we've seen it before, and I'm sure based on there are different stages to COVID-19 that we had gone through. If you really look at the first phase where people really looked at trying to understand what this is all about, they were grappling with it because I don't think anybody has ever seen it, unless you're somebody who took time to understand what these risks mean to the society in general. I don't think 99.9% of the people were really ready to, So when COVID-19 sort of came about, we were taking it in our own strides. Till mid-March, I don't think as individuals, as a country, we kind of really took it seriously. We kind of comprehended the impact of this virus. But since then, things completely turned upside down for everyone in this country. The country that I'm coming from, Sri Lanka, we went into a lockdown effectively starting 16th Monday. 14th of March, which was a Saturday, and right throughout up until 20th or 22nd effectively of April will be on a effective lockdown. Now, what's interesting there is when we're saying we're on effective lockdown, it all depends on how people sort of approached it. And there was this popular thing that was doing its rounds, this particular slide that was doing its round on Facebook that specifically talks about what people go through in terms of facing COVID-19. So if you really look at it, it talks about 3 different zones, which is the fear zone, learning zone, and the growth zone. I'll just walk you through some of that. It's quite natural that we face the fear zone when we face this sort of uncertainty, and then we're expected to gradually move on to the learning zone and of course to the growth zone. That's how you really get out of that. But what's interesting is, although this was an adapted version of a original document that was done some time back, I'm really sorry I don't know who the author of the original document is, but it's a concept that's been widely used within the personal improvement space. Which is, there are 4 different phases what we talk about in terms of personal growth. Remember, we were all used to a comfort zone. As you can see here, we were all used to a comfort zone. When I say comfort zone, I'm talking about basic comforts that we were all experiencing up until that point. Things like getting up in the morning, doing our chores, getting ready, sending kids to school, going to office at a particular time, doing your thing. We've taken it for granted, how we shop, what we do, the work that we do, how do we do it. For decades and decades, we were used to a particular way of doing something, and that was our comfort zone. How we mingled with each other, this whole socialization aspect of it, how we had meetings, how we socially interacted with people, how we moved with people, how we went into houses. These were all part and parcel of what we call culture, which was what was a comfort zone for all of us. But however, since the 16th of March, effectively, things have completely changed upside down. We were confined to stay at home. We were asked to keep social distancing, and the way that we did commerce, basic shopping was completely turned upside down. Now, all this, what it meant was all of a sudden there was no comfort zone. We were pushed overnight, just like that. We had to take that plunge and move into a zone. We were forced to move into a zone that none of us had control over. And to a great extent, I don't think anybody really knew how long this is going to go, because nobody knew at which point this so-called COVID-19 will hit the bottom of the curve and start sort of recovering. So we plunged into the unknown, and that really created a fear psychosis. So all of a sudden, things that we basically take for granted, like knowing very well that at least in the civilized world, where right to life is always questioned, because at the rate things were happening, you really don't know what was true, what was not, how this is going to get transmitted. All of a sudden, we were questioning ourselves in terms of our basic instincts of existence. And in spite of all that, what happened was, people, when things like this happen, what we need to keep in mind, in training terms, in neurolinguistic terms, there's this concept, I learned it from Tony Robbins long years ago, that says, your energy flows where your focus goes. So the question is, what do you focus on? For majority of the people, what you find is they focus really on the negative news. Even to date, I know a lot of people who keep a daily tab of what's happening with the coronavirus. Now, on one side, one can say, look, that's a smart thing to do, so that you could take necessary precautions. But then again, I don't think you need to be obsessed with all the material around coronavirus, right? Because at the end of the day, initially, it would have made sense to sort of keep a constant touch with it. But then again, it came to a point fairly quickly, we kind of understood the moment we were on a lockdown, as long as you were adhering to what was required, how you did your shopping, to how you picked things up when deliveries came, and how you managed yourself within their household, and you follow those basic sanitization guidelines, that was pretty much it what you could do. I mean, there wasn't anything else you could do. And in a situation like this, if you continue to sort of dig deep onto the daily scores of what's happening globally with corona, how many deaths in Italy, US, Sri Lanka, how many newfound patients of corona, which areas are they from, is it quarantine, where you call people, try to understand, look, this, that, and the other. Well, unfortunately, what it does is it's going to dig a bigger hole, because this fear psychosis tends to set in. So one of the things hopefully you would have done over the weeks now is you would have moved away from that fear zone, where you would have come to accept status quo for what it is, and you did your part to move on. Now, starting 20th April, as we all know, that's Monday, tomorrow, gradually they're trying to ease out this whole curfew situation. That's purely to get the economic activity moving. But having said that, they've also made it very clear that that they're not going to hesitate to reimpose curfew, but in a much stricter way if there is another sign of another outbreak. Now, as government, as institutions, companies will take those necessary precautions. Being a head of a small institution myself, one of the questions that I continue to grapple with is how and when do I bring people in? And one of the things that we've clearly understood is we're not going to bring people in for the sake of bringing them in unless there's confirmed work for us to do. The kind of industry that we're in allows us to do it that way. So while we're going to take all necessary precautions to safeguard them as per the strict WHO Health Authority guidelines, which is what's been mandated by the company as well, but still we're not going to bring people in because one of the things that we learned for the last 5 weeks is there's enormous amount of work one can do working from home as well. I know it's very industry specific, but the particular industry that I'm part of allows us to do it that way. I mean, we're able to deliver our services online, and we've got fairly a robust schedule going on in terms of that. So I'm not really looking at risking people in because remember, this threat is not over yet. It's bound to continue, and as a result, I think it's important that all of us seriously take a good look at it and take all the necessary precautions. So while we do all that, the question is, what have you been doing for the last 1 month? Remember, I told you your energy always flows where your focus goes. So if you are focusing on the doom and gloom all this time, well, I don't think you would have done much in terms of productivity. But then again, there's no need to cry over spoiled milk. Let's sort of move on with lives, right? The question is, from tomorrow onwards, from 20th onwards, what are you going to do to really commit yourself to develop? Because at the end of the day, remember, no matter what people say, I don't think we will return to normalcy in terms of what it used to be. The way that we see it, I mean, still there's no clear-cut solution to this problem. So, and also what we don't know is this is a virus situation, right? And there could be more of these things coming through. So I don't think the world will be what it is going forward, the way that we saw it. Just pretty much like the airline travel, how it changed after 9/11 for good. The security measures, extra security measures. I'm sure there'll be a lot of focus in terms of how we go about doing our work, and that's going to create a new norm. I mean, I come from the education industry, and one of the things that we continuously talk about is how do we really deal with our standard classes with the existing infrastructure, if and when they want us to open things up. In terms of keeping social distancing. So how do you blend online versus what we do now effectively with physical classes? So we all have to adapt. There's no question about it. And I think the key is really for people to really start looking at, without being worried too much, let the administration and the authorities decide how people want to come. Now, for instance, if you're invited to come to work, again, don't be too panicky about it. Make sure you follow the basic guidelines in terms of health and safety. You do your bit and you take the necessary precautions, and that's it. And because the life has to move on. But what's really important is even from 20th onwards, at least in the foreseeable future, they've kind of defined certain time limits. The work is supposed to start for the private sector at 10. And by 8 in the night, they're trying to impose curfew again. And they've suggested for government institutions, especially in the three main districts, for it to operate at 50% of the capacity, up to a maximum of 50% of the capacity, both in the private and the government sector. And I think most companies probably will also look at bringing people in, not in block all of them together, but I'm sure they will look at bringing people in different batches, so that one person might really not come every day, all 5 days of the week, but they'll probably take a shift perspective. So all in all, what I'm trying to tell you is, when you're getting back to work again, one of the fundamental challenges that you will face is this uncertainty. It's the same uncertainty you had on 16th, 17th of March, you're going to continue to have on 20th of April. While you need to pay attention to take care of yourself, also remember it's really about how do you make use of this time, because all of a sudden, definitely all of you, while I'm sure a lot of people will say staying at home actually had added amount of work, and we were pretty busy with our own families, which is really great and which is how it should be. I think also it created a lot of opportunities for you to spend some time on self-reflection, understanding your basic strengths, weaknesses, and start dealing with some of that time that you didn't have before, to put in some quality time to understand what it is all about. Now, as we go along, I'll start sharing a few more videos in terms of a few things you could do to improve yourself, in terms of self-improvement, a very systematic way of dealing with it. I'm hoping to put down a series of videos. But for the time being, what I'd like to tell you is, while you're trying to get back to normal, take a moment and take a step back and start documenting some of, from a self-help perspective, some of your strengths, some of your weaknesses, some of your opportunities, and the threats that you see. Not for the company, I'm talking about you as an individual, because later on we'll be using different models and diagrams to sort of take a step back and understand, and probably SWOT analysis, a personal SWOT analysis, is something that all of you should do at this point in time. And a lot of people who are part of this program or this page have gone through this exercise with me, so I encourage them to do that again, because it's a new norm. There are new opportunities, there are new threats. Some of those strengths are not strengths anymore. As you can see, some of those strengths that you never thought were strengths all of a sudden have become strengths. So I really want you to take a step back and do this personal SWOT analysis, because personal SWOT analysis is one of the basic tools that anyone can very easily use for their self-improvement, which we will talk how to use in a future video. So again, remember, a SWOT analysis is not something that you should do in a jiffy. Spend some quality time on that on your own. Also, talking to people. Your spouse could be a good one to get that feedback, as I always say, because that person sees things in a different way. If you could get into a call with your colleagues to understand what are some of the strengths and weaknesses you have. Maybe it's a good time to talk to your boss as well to understand what he thinks. Although I don't know how the timing will look like, because for most companies it's a performance evaluation cycle. So whether the person is willing to sort of give you that sort of candid feedback, but give it a try. Just ask them, what are some of the strengths and weaknesses that they see in you. And also, boss is a good person to also have a conversation around some of the opportunities and threats they foresee for you going forward when the new norm sets in a post-COVID-19 scenario. So that's something that I would encourage all of you all to do. And I'll basically come back with another video to showcase how to use this basic SWOT analysis to further your career, further your basically how to sort of use that in a post-COVID-19 scenario. So until we cross our paths again, stay blessed, continue to learn, expand and grow, as I say always. Good luck.